Anyway, that dude right there, that's Richard Garriott. Been doing this for 40 years. Made the Ultima series, founded Origin Systems, and also happened to have gone into space. So he's got that going for him. And he is working, he's the executive leader of the project and the creative director, and this is his vision for the product. He's co-writing the story with Tracy Hickman. You may know him from the Dragonlance series and Ravenloft AD&D modules, and most recently his Sojourner Tales board game. And then there's myself. I've been doing this for about half the time as Richard, but that's still over 20 years.
But at least you're up to half.
I'm up to half.
More than half now.
Yes. One always.
From now on, you will be more than half that experience. Prior to recently, you were always.
You and your math. All right, so in 1997, my first project was Ultima Online. It was one of the very first MMORPGs. In fact, we coined the term MMORPG along with the idea of rares and shards and things like that. And it was first MMO to have player housing, subscription, and now it's the longest running virtual world ever. And most recently, I was at Disney working on a connected learning platform. Our current project is all crowdfunded. This is already out of date. We've raised 4.7 million. We asked for $1 million during Kickstarter. We got about 2, and since then we've raised about 2.8 via our own website. So if you like what we're doing, please help us and help fund the project, and we would really appreciate that. At these numbers, that makes us the second largest crowdfunded game in history. The number 1, of course, is Star Citizen, which is more than 10 times what we've raised. So they're at 52 million last count. So, yeah, wow, they're their own thing. Pledges start at $45, although we're actually running, we've been running a promotion for a while now with Alienware, where you can get a $20 coupon from their website, and then it actually is only $25 for entry level backing. And we do weekly updates, so every week we do a fairly long, extensive update that includes a lot of information on what our current status is, new content we've made, updates on the pledge rewards, etc. And then every month we let backers in the game for a long weekend, 4 to 5 days at a time, and we've done that for the last 9 months. We started letting people in as soon as we could just have an avatar walking around on screen. We're insane, and no one should ever let any players ever play a game when it's this rough, but it's actually the greatest thing ever, and the feedback that we're getting from the players and the iterating we're doing is just
I'd like to comment on that too. It is fascinating. All those of you, again, who are backers and have been playing are obviously familiar with this at this point, but for those of you who are not yet backers, it is an interesting journey. Where a lot of people who come to the project and see either current screenshots or see video clips of people playing are going, well, that game's not done, and of course that game's not done. And historically, developers wait until they're either finished or so close to finished they can put a good smoke reel together, a demo reel that shows all the best of and sells the game the best. And in our case, we've been public long before we had that capability. And so it is an educational process to get people over that fence and say, please evaluate this as what it is, which is a work in progress. And if you have critiques of it, which we do too, feel free to express them, but please don't judge it based upon a finished product. Don't compare it to something that's already done and go, why isn't this as good as that finished product? Because of course we still are only half to 2/3 of the way through.
So real quick overview on the features of the game. At a very high level, the game is a narrative story built on top of a sandbox multiplayer RPG. And Richard, wrote one of the very first computer role-playing games, Calabeth, back in 1979, and then did a long line of single-player RPGs, and then he and I together did Ultima Online, again, one of the very first virtual worlds, and now MMO, and now we are making what we think is a new kind of game that we call selective multiplayer that has multiple modes of play, including, did you want to jump in?
No.
Single player offline. Now this is a solo RPG mode a la Skyrim or the traditional Ultimas, where you're playing by yourself, following the narrative. There are the same sandbox elements you'll find in multiplayer, but you don't have to log in, no DRM, etc., no account, etc. Then there's 3 modes of online play. one we call single player online. And the way that works is you're still by yourself, but because you're logged into the servers, you're getting constant updates on the world state. So if another player puts down a business and starts selling weapons, you can buy weapons from the shopkeeper that they put down, even though you don't actually see that other player. Update any world state changes that happen, like a town comes under siege or players trigger something in the world, that'll show up in your world. So it's kind of asynchronous play with other people, even though you're by yourself. And then there we have friends online, where you're only playing with people that are on your friends list. And then we have open online, which is the closest we come to a massively multiplayer game. But even in that mode, we're sorting you based on who's on your friends list, who you've traded items with, who you've gone on adventures with, who you've encountered. And the way we do all this is there is no server selection. So everybody is playing on one server, and all we do is we instance out a city or a scene as we need to if it gets too full. But then we collapse those instances when we don't need to, and every one of those copies of a town, for instance, shares the same metadata. So again, that example of where I was talking about a player putting down a shopkeeper, as soon as he puts down that shopkeeper, that propagates across all copies of that town for every single player. Another big feature for us is player-driven economy, and a lot of people do talk about this, and a lot of games also have this. Like Eve is a really great example of a very strong player-driven economy. We're building something similar, although we're taking it to some absurd and logical extremes. So all the best items in the game are made by players. With the exception of literally 3 items that you will find out of the plot, there's nothing that you can find in the game that isn't better than what a player can make. Not only that, we are going to use some of the player items that players make as loot in the game. And the way that's going to work is if you make, an example is if you make 20 long swords and you go and sell those to an NPC shopkeeper, he will use some of those to sell in his store. And every item made by a player has what we call a maker's mark. So you know which player made that item. And so when you sell those 20 swords to the shopkeeper, he'll keep, say, 10 of them to stock in his store. The other 10 he will sell to other adventurers that have already come by and bought things. And those are the items that we use in the loot table versus system-generated content. So if you sell some swords to that shopkeeper and then you go into the sewers underneath the town, the skeleton that you kill, the longsword that skeleton was holding, there's a good chance it might be the longsword you made and sold to the shopkeeper. And so every time you find items in the world, they're going to be made by players 90% of the time. Then another thing is we're a really strong believer in player housing and player-run businesses and the tie that provides players to the world. But we feel very strongly that they should be in the world and not instance out. So they're all, just like the real world, there's a finite amount of real estate in each episode. So for episode 1, there will be a finite number of lots in the game that players can claim. There's ways to share property amongst players, so you can have you can give permissions to other people, so you can either just share it as a family, or you can rent out spaces in your houses as well. So there's options for people who don't own their own property to share that. And then two last of the main features, we have real-time, what we call dynamic combat. It's kind of like a card combat where you build a deck, and then when you go into combat, instead of the sort of fixed shortcut bar you see in most MMOs, which is basically just memorization and repetition of patterns, is like I hit 1 and I hit 2 and I hit 1 again, oh maybe now I hit 3. And you're just maximizing that DPS. The way it works in our game is, and actually Richard, you give a really good metaphor for training.
Yeah, the metaphor I like about it is, I used to be a tournament fencer in the university. And before a tournament, you would often drill the moves that you hope you will think of when that particular combat takes place. Another example would be in the U.S. military. Before we go invade a desert country, most of those units go and rehearse their desert maneuvers so that those maneuvers are freshest in their mind, even though they've also been trained how to do combat in the swamps or the forests or other locations. They bring those mentally to the front.
And then we have a 5-episode plan, so episodes 2 through 5 might, because it's in Unity, we might expand on other platforms like console and maybe even mobile. And we are not subscription based. It's a pay to play with an add-on store. Think Guild Wars 2, that kind of model. So you'll pay approximately $45 for episode 1, and then similar pricing for each episode. And then there will be, and everything can be earned in the game. So there's nothing that you, other than exclusive items you get for being a backer because you helped fund the product at the beginning. Once we launch, everything in the game can be earned via gold, adventuring and crafting and the economy. And then there's an add-on store for things like maybe some exclusive houses or some vanity items like cloaks and things like that. Again, very much like a Guild Wars model. We are, in addition to crowdfunding, we're also doing a lot of crowdsourcing. So art, music, code, fonts, etc. We are all crowdsourced. Right now, for instance, 90% of the game music in the game has all been crowdsourced.
And it will be basically 100% other than tuned by YOLO.
Right, yeah. And then about 10% of the environmental art, so things you see in the world, furniture and plants and paintings and rugs and all those kinds of things. About 10% of that was also crowdsourced. And people who contribute to crowdsourced content, we actually give them the option that they can we'll either pay them in real dollars or we'll pay them double that amount if they want to add it to their pledge to increase their pledge level. And so far, interesting, we thought no one's going to want the pledge dollar amount, they're just going to want the money. 90% of the people who contributed actually wanted to use it to increase their pledge, get more cool gear and loot and stuff like that. We also do we have a very extensive use of the Unity Asset Store. One of the beautiful things about using the Unity engine is the Unity isn't just about an engine and a tool set, which are both amazing and great, but they also have this whole ecosystem where they built an asset store where you can go and buy content that you need. And one of the things we do, in addition to just buying content, some of that content we can use right out of the box just as it is, but some of that content we have to improve. We either have to optimize the polygon count or remap some of the textures or repaint some of the textures. And when we do that, we actually offer it back to the original creator for free, and that they can sell that improved version of the asset they created. The only thing we ask is that they mention as seen in Shroud the Avatar.
Yeah, another interesting example, I think, of us doing that successfully is a lot of people who build things like dungeon sets are usually doing it as an artist, not as a dungeon builder. And so a lot of times we'll buy those dungeon sets and you'll try to actually assemble a maze out of it and you realize they're missing a T or a corner or something in order to be able to make it hook back up and finish the set. So we'll just finish that part of the set for them and then give it back to them.
So that's a very quick shotgun overview of the product. Again, we're giving another presentation that's an hour of basically what we just did. So now we're going to get into some deep dives, and during these, and I've broken it up into about 5 sections. And so really at any time, you guys can raise your hand, interrupt, ask questions. We're going to try and keep this loosey-goosey. If it's something that, like, I'm about to answer in the next slide, I will say, hold on, I'm going to show that in the next slide. That doesn't mean I'm trying to shut down the question. It just means I'm literally going to answer it in the next slide or two. So.
And by the way, the reason I call these deep dives and round tables is this really is for us a design session. It's both a chance for us to kind of describe what it is that's either already functioning for that those in the front row might recognize, or the things we're in the middle of or preparing to implement right now. Sort of, in some sense, it's a sales pitch, but it's also or a test pitch. But also, it's the time where we wanted to poll the community to go back and go like, hey, if you don't think that death idea or PvP idea is any good, now is the best time for us to hear about it. So it's meant to be an interactive session. And for those of you who are not backers, it's a chance to get to see how we work. Because even online, when we're not getting a chance to see it face-to-face, you guys notice what we do with regularity is try to engage the community in participating in precisely what it is we're building for you.
Great. So the first section we're going to talk about is conflicts. So this is combat, class, levels, stats, etc. And again, if you have any questions or something's not clear or you want to point out, yes, Eric.
Maybe you already did this, but I'm curious, who's currently a backer versus who's thinking of backing?
Yeah, but most of the backers in the front row, but we have a few that didn't get in the front row. The backers, raise your hand again. So there you go. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
And everyone else who should back, everybody else raise your hand.
Exactly.
Okay, just to jump right in. Oh, by the way, the picture you're looking at, we have what we call sigils. So for magic, crafting, and combat, we have these symbols. And anybody who's played in Ultima or one of Richard's games knows that he's really into symbology and numerology, and we're definitely carrying all that forward. You can also see there's runes in there, so we have a runic language. It's actually a slightly different version than the original runic from Ultima's. It's an updated version, but if we have questions, we can jump into that as well. But this is the combat sigil. So there's, and I'm going to talk about the different schools of combat here in a second, and we can pop back and look at this. So, first of all, we're a classless / multi-class system. You don't start the game by saying I want to be a warrior, an archer, or a wizard, or a cleric. We instead have multiple schools of combat, multiple schools of magic, multiple schools of crafting, and you as a player can choose to mix and match those skill sets however you wish to come up with your own class. You can build a classic tank or healer or fire wizard or something like that. That is absolutely possible in the system, but you can build any type of hybrid you want as well, and you can dynamically change that.
And even the way you start the game, by the way, in homage to games that we've done in the past you may be familiar with, you don't even make decisions up front about rolling dice into attributes or making these early decisions. In fact, you go through a bit of a personality profile test up front that kind of determines your initial state. However, even that initial state can be rapidly overrun by how you choose to evolve your character in the game.
There are 3 base stats: strength, dexterity, and intelligence. Anybody who's worked with Richard has received the less stats is better rant from him, and so we very much adhere to that. So there's only 3 base stats. There's a lot of derived stats we get from that. There's only 3 main stats. The way we do have levels, and for those of you who have played other Ultimas or Ultima Online, the first reaction is usually a slight bit of dismay. However, the way, our experience, if you played Ultima Online, it was a use-based skill system, and unfortunately, that led to some really odd behavior on players' parts to level up their skills. So the cast the fire field and walk in and out of it repeatedly, or stand in front of the guy and have him punch me in the face to pump up my brawling skills. So we intentionally chose to go with a slightly more structured approach, especially coupled with the fact that there's no classes and things like that. So
and we interpret levels very differently than classically. If you think of levels in most role-playing games, levels is sort of this geometric curve that makes people more and more powerful. That quickly means that level 100 people can't enjoy playing even with level 1 or 10 people. In our case, as you level, the primary thing you gain is more points to apply to different kinds of skills, which gives you uniqueness and diversity in what you can do as a player. Isn't this great mathematical scalar to your power?
And there's 2 pools of experience points. There's adventuring experience points and crafting experience points, and doing either. So if you go out and you do adventuring type stuff like combat, quests, etc., you will earn adventure experience points, which will then translate at periodic times to adventuring levels. And every time you level up, you get a set of skill points. And you get a set of adventuring skill points that you can then use to pump into these schools, and I'll show you what some of the schools look like. And skills are divided into 2 different kinds of skills. There are actives, so these are skills that you use actively in combat. So this is a spell you would cast: a fireball, a parry, a shield block, those kinds of things. And when you add points to those skills, that just adds more glyphs. That's our name for the card in your deck. That just adds more of those into your deck, so you have a better chance of getting one of those dealt to you during combat. There's a set of innate skills that increase the damage, or the damage over time chance, or the range, or the radius of all your fire spells, and that's the way you increase the power of your fireball, is pumping those passives. And again, I want to show you a skill tree so you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. So for combat, there are 8 schools of combat. There are 3 defense schools. So there's heavy armor. This is plate and chainmail. There's light armor. This is where cloth and leather are going to sit. And then there are shields. And then for offense, there's blades, bludgeons, pole arms, and ranged. And then there's the 8th one is a school called tactics, which is more generalized combat skills. That's where things like offhand attacks or ways to pump up your health or your healing rate or your strength, those analyzing attacks.
And for those of you who are backers may have noticed that tactics is new. Yeah.
I actually want to jump in right there with tactics being new. The change in R9 where you guys dropped medium
armor.
which was in the original sigil, it was known as male, not medium, because you have shield, Gambison, I'm not sure how to say it, male and plate. That's how the runic ciphers. The decision to drop the male, I assume it's because of all of the people going, where do I put my skill points for leather armor, or why?
So the reason, when we were originally laying out the different skills for combat, heavy armor was really sort of easy to characterize the kinds of skills we wanted. I mean, that's kind of, heavy armor is your typical tank, heavy plate guy who's basically going to be there to take a lot of damage, and he's going to be able to absorb a lot of damage, wear very thick armor. And light armor, on the other hand, was about avoiding damage or being nimble and quick or not being burdened down, so it was easier to do things that required more dexterity or intelligence, like spells or ranged or etc.
And let me just throw in one more item on there too. Again, a clear distinction between those two for us was how we wanted to do multi-classing between combat and magic. We didn't want to make this hard and fast rule that mages can't use steel or have enough metal armor on or something of this nature. We were trying to do something a little more continuous and part of the pseudoscience. And so it was clear though that we wanted, in general, that if you were going to be wearing the heavier plate armors and things of that nature, that fundamentally those would tend to interfere with your magic type activities, and that the lightest cloth and leather kinds of things would not. So again, there's nice clear distinctions between heavy and light. The problem came up. Medium.
And also from the crafting side of things, heavy, which is made out of metal, it's going to be like blacksmiths are going to be the primary, although they need some leather straps, so they're going to need some help from the tailors there, but it's primarily a blacksmith's job to make the plate. And then, the tanner's going to make the leather, but the tailor's going to make the straps.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I've got the whole recipe book if you need it.
Yeah. So,
can you make a wiki for that?
Oh.
The light armor, that's what the tailors are going to make. They're going to make the leather armor and the cloth armor, etc. And so from a crafting perspective, it also was like, well, wait, so the blacksmiths are going to make 2 different types of armor, but they're going to make the medium and the heavy, whereas the tailor. So there was a crafting influence, but then really it just came down to what is the characteristic of medium armor, which was going to be chainmail, basically. And it's like, why is chainmail necessarily from a active use in combat that different from plate mail? And so what we ended up putting in there were skills that like kind of brawler type skills, so trips and dodges and things like that. But that was really kind of like, well, why? So wait, I can only do a pommel. Like we had one that was like basically a pommel strike. Like wait, I can only do a pommel strike if I'm wearing chainmail. That doesn't make any sense. So that's why we decided to have this more generalized tree and like offhand attacks. Like so we had dual wield in blades. It's like, well, wait, I can only dual wield if I'm in the blade school, and that also felt kind of odd. So instead, we added an offhand attack in this tactics school, and that's kind of why we ended up ditching medium.
Which means the combat sigils have already been printed on t-shirts are collector's items.
We already have rares, and in the real world. So that was kind of the logic why medium and tactics changed. Okay, and then there are 10 magic schools. There's Druidism, which includes the sort of all the elemental schools of air, earth, fire, and water. Wizardry, which includes life, death, sun, and moon magic. And then we have 2 sort of independent ones, chaos and focus. And that's what the magic sigil looks like. And so you can see at the top we have sun magic. At the bottom we have the moon magic, and the reason that doesn't look like your typical moon is because in our game the moon is shattered. And then upper left is fire, bottom right is air, bottom left is water, upper right is earth, and then on the left and right we have death and life. In the very middle, the all-seeing eye is omnipotence or focused skills, and then all the arrows pointing everywhere are chaos magic. So this is what a fire magic tree. So this is what one of the, this is me diagramming it out. It's not the fancy version that you see in the game.
Yeah, it's funny. You're actually going to see literally the documents we use to make the game, and it's funny. This is Starr's method of these yellow and white boxes. So everybody at the office is very familiar with Starr's output. You're going to see when we get to my food, nature to nutrition, you'll see my spreadsheet method as well.
And remember I was talking about actives and passives. So all the yellow boxes are active spells that you would cast in combat. And all the white boxes are the innate skills or the passive skills that adding points increase the power of all those other fire skills. So at the very top you have Flame Fist, so it's a melee. And each school of magic we tried to have a sort of standout characteristic of it. So for instance, fire magic adds damage over time. So all the fire spells have the chance to light your target on fire. So fire magic's sort of main defining characteristics is this damage over time. And then at the bottom of all the elemental schools is one of the highest level spells is the ability to summon an elemental of that school. And again, the way the actives and the passives interact with each other is highly flammable increases both the damage that your fire spells do, but it also increases the chance for the damage over time to happen, and even the damage that the damage over time will do. And then Fire Reach increases the radius and the range of your fire spells. And then Fireproof increases your fire resistance, because we have different damage types and resistances. So that's what a fire magic tree looks like.
And you're not going to show all the trees.
No, I'm not going to show all the trees.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, one of the things I noticed during R9 combat was that you guys have actually put in 3 different types of damage over time with fire.
Yeah.
With the 3 different types of damage over time, I waited till the last day to explain this to everybody, but they were asking how do you win all your duels. I said I use all 3 types of damage over time. Most people didn't realize that those were all in the game.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
Is it your intent? Backers can play the game during.
No, he's asking what are the 3 types of damage over time. So why don't you tell people what
So,
you do?
I mean, I was playing.
Reveal your
This is news to me, so.
Yeah,
No,
I was getting
it's
last
news
week
to me.
last night. So.
Yeah, so essentially when I make my deck, I put Flame Fist, the Fire Arrow, and then if you combine Fire Arrow with a Death spell, which is a medium range spell that
You can
draws
do that?
life, it creates a combo.
Wait, you can do a death spell with the fire arrow?
You have to drag and drop with the glyph system.
I had no idea. That's
And then you
badass.
get 3 different fire damage over time abilities.
And they stack?
They stack.
Holy crap.
So
Okay.
with that, is it the intent?
So I have to run back to the hotel now.
Is it the intent to make it to where the people who continue to use more active spells get rewarded for being so interactive with combat in a variety type way? Or is it, we're going to take this out and all fire is going to have the same damage over time down the road?
Well, everything's in a constant state of flux from a balance perspective. But thank you for reminding me, because that's one part I actually left out of the description of combat. So one of the things, one of the reasons we kind of, well, actually I'm going to get into that in a second. So let me come back to combos.
Cool.
But great question. Yes, the idea is that we want to have different ways that the damage over time type things interact with each other and interact with play. And we absolutely, the players who are much more active in combat are building their decks with the idea of combos in mind, which I'm going to explain what a combo is here. Schools, I was describing those earlier. So at the top we have blades, at the bottom we have bludgeons, on the left we have pole arms, on the right we have ranged. In the upper left we have heavy armor, in the bottom right we have light armor. In the lower left was where medium armor sat. That's where tactics is going to live now. And in the upper right is shield. And in the future, we may have something within the center as well.
Tactics.
No, tactics is
sorry,
already being
sorry.
done. So again, this is an example of what the Blades combat school looks like. And again, same thing. Yellow are active skills. Right are innate skills. And so vital points is the idea that you know where the best places to stab people with the pointy bit is. So you're going to do more damage. Speed increases the speed of, obviously increases the speed of your attacks, and defense gives you a slight defensive bonus when you have a sword equipped. So you're better at parrying and riposte and things like that. And then there's some obvious things like a thrust and a parry and things like that. But then like rend is another damage over time. So even though fire magic, its main defining characteristics and damage over time. Some of the other schools also have damage over time. I like Rend a lot myself.
And if I can talk about that coup de grace at the bottom, another thing that I wanted to make sure we got in as often as possible to the skill set were skills that were tactically usable only at unique moments in time. So that imagine if you're fighting the dragon smog and the one cheek, the missing scale shows up. That's the time you want to use the unleash the black arrow. And so to where you would have to be really paying attention to what's happening on the field, the state of your opponents, the attitude of your opponents, and use that to make a decision tactically. And we even are tracking things like whether you're attacking someone from behind or in front, and so we can even include skills that are effective from one side or the other, so that would change your tactical combat aspects.
And to be clear too, like something like coup de grace, it's not that we make it so you can't use that skill, but the way coup de grace is, it's if your opponent has more than 25% of their health, it's just like a normal special attack. I mean, it's just as if you would do a thrust or a double slash or whatever. However, if your opponent is 25% or less of their health, you get a huge damage bonus. So it's basically a finishing move that is much. You can use it at any time, but it's much more beneficial when they're already.
Yeah, about the deck systems, it seems like it's going kind of sway to random, like you said. You memorize what you want to do, but it may not come up.
Yeah.
How would that actually interact with some skills that only work in some situations? And because it seems like that could lead to a lot of frustration.
Well, that's why I was trying to explain. Because coup de grace you can use any time. It just gets a big bonus if you use it at the right time. So it's just a timing thing.
Yeah. Okay, so it basically just comes a form of luck depending on what comes up early.
Yeah, but also don't forget, you can build a deck with as many or as few skills as you want. And even though we didn't get into it, there's even a way you can lock.
Well, that's what I'm about to do. So this is the hey, let's wait till the next slide. All right. So let's get to the next slide. So the way our interactive or dynamic combat works is you basically have two options. You can go traditional MMO route. You can have a locked combat bar, just like you've always been, you've always known, and you've been happy with until now when you found something better than you made. But what the nice thing about that is that it's more predictable. You always know I'm going to have a heal in slot 1. I'm going to have a fireball in slot 2. It's going to cost you a little bit more focus. Focus is our mana in the game. We purposely don't call it mana because we want it as a shared pool between combat and magic. So versus having like an energy and a mana, we just wanted one pool. So it's called focus. But anyway, if you have a fully locked bar, you use a little bit more focus every time you cast a spell or you use a skill. You can't combo skills together, which I'll explain what that means in a second. And you're limited to the maximum bar size, which is currently 10 to 12 slots. We're still kind of deciding whether it's going to be more than 10. Option 2 is dynamic, what we call a dynamic bar. And what that means is you build a deck like you would in Magic or Hearthstone or whatever, and the way you build the deck determines a lot about how those skills appear. So the fewer skills you put in your deck, but the more copies of them, the more likely those skills are going to appear when you're in combat, right? Or you can, but the nice thing about the fact having a deck, you're not limited to the size of your shortcut bar. You can have 40, even though there's only 10 slots that are on screen at any given time, you could have a deck with 20, 30, 40 different skills. Now the give and take there is that you're decreasing the percentage that any given one is going to show up at any given time, but you have access all of a sudden to a much wider variety of skills. We still give you the option to lock a few of those slots in your bar, but again, when you lock those skills, you can't combo them. And what combos are is, so the way it works is you're in combat, you have a shortcut bar at the bottom. As soon as combat starts, we start dealing you your skills. So they start sliding up from the bottom into the shortcut bars, and they're all color coded, so you know a red, any skill or magic spell that's got a red outline is damage. Anyone that's got a blue outline is a heal. Anything that's got a green outline is a buff. Anything that's got a yellow outline is a debuff. So just by peripheral vision, because you can tell what kind of skill or spell that's come up, and they start appearing. You have skills that tweak how fast they appear. You have skills that tweak how fast they go away. You have skills that determine what's the cost to switch between them, and as they come up, you have the opportunity to just cast them like you would a normal spell. So just like you would on a shortcut bar, you can either click on them with your mouse or hit the number key. But if two of them come up that are what are a combo, so the example that Joe was giving is that if you combine Fire Arrow with Death Ray, it's not only does fire damage, but it also does a life drain, because that's what a Death Ray. And so I forgot, was it called Fiery Decay?
Yeah, I've got a 1-minute video I can email you if you want to show people.
Sure. I don't know if I even have internet access though, so that may not work.
Okay.
But
I don't know if you do or not.
Well, we might do that towards the end.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool. And so what that means is if you're paying attention to the skills that are coming up, you can combo them into much more powerful skills. And once you get enough of those combos in place, I mean, right now we only have 10 combos.
Yeah.
But already, I know some people who build their deck specifically so they can get those combos even though there's only 10.
And the other thing too is that when you're in that combat system, the combos time out like the rest of your glyphs.
Yeah.
So planning when you create the combo can actually extend the life of the combo to where it's at the right point of combat, which goes into what your comment was about getting that skill at the right time. You do have some control over that. There are skills that you can get that'll hold those glyphs longer. There are skills that'll let you get rid of them, and creating the combo at the right time can extend the life of when you get that combo. So the actual
Flat out random, at least.
What's up?
That's a lot better than random.
Yeah. So
What's interesting is when you're first exposed to the system, and especially when you're just first told about it, it feels very, very random. But it's actually not the case at all. And in fact, it's much more strategic than any other combat system I've ever played with, because after every encounter, at least the way I play is after every encounter, I literally go back and I fiddle and I tweak a little bit and I adjust which cards are in my deck, what the number values are of deal speed and discard speed, and just sort of tweak and optimize, which is something I've never done in an RPG of that fiddling and tweaking.
And let me say a comment here on one of your questions, which was on our team there was no bigger skeptic of moving towards this dealt glyphs system than me. And my approach to it was, I said, look, this card type mechanic has worked great in desktop gaming for turn-based games, and it has or in Magic 101 is a computer game, it's still turn-based. And I had no faith or confidence or any reason to believe that it would work in a real-time environment. And every time we would sit around the table and we would argue about it as a team, I would express my displeasure. Often vehemently, but I would try to keep my public face on that relatively quiet, because a disagreement, one of the things about a team, and I think any good team is you hire really talented people with good ideas and you let them run and either succeed or fail on their own, and only if the person you've hired to go do that it doesn't work, then do you take a crowbar and make them do it. You're fun, much more engaging. Much more truly tactical and strategic at the same time than I had experienced in pretty much any other role-playing game. And while there clearly work to be done and things that need to be changed, the UI currently is pretty crappy. I think we're on a good vein.
So if I can actually jump in with the card system,
And then we'll do
there is a lot more control than just what I mentioned. And the biggest thing that I like to tell people, because I've spent a lot of time talking to people who hate the combat system, and when I'm done spending about 20 minutes with them in game, they love it. The thing you've got to realize is the way you build your deck, just like with any card system, the way that you go in with your hand in a card game is going to determine how well you can play your hand. So if you build your deck and allow enough skills to populate so you never get a bad hand, then you're going to be successful in combat. There's some thought you have to put into it that goes beyond just, oh, I need to mindlessly level up, and then whatever the next skill is I can get will be the best thing I do, and I do it over and over again. That's what's so amazing about it.
But here we also missed a question you had, so
Okay,
I ran past
so,
it.
yeah, my concern is not so much in terms of the deck system itself, it's awesome. My concern is for my ability to actually be able to use it. I have very bad arthritis in my hands. My twitch reflexes are not fast.
Well, by the way, then you fit into my category, which is I also remain the person who, if I ever go into an Unreal tournament or anything else, I'm going to be the loser. Because I'm just not good at Twitch FPS type combat.
No, I have to actually even completely flip my keyboard. I can't even do. I have to mouse with the other hand at this point.
Yeah, but the good news about this again is that there's ways to tune it for almost any playstyle. As soon as I realized, I've built some decks that I realized I built this deck in a way that's going to be more demanding on me for dexterity than is going to be the way I want to play. So I need to build a deck that supports my method of relationship with the gameplay. And don't forget, you can always go back literally completely traditional. And there's just some interesting things that happen when you free this up.
The other question is this: in terms of this combat system combined with movement during combat, this is going to be really demanding on people who are like me in terms of disability. It's going to be really hard.
And that's possible. And so, by the way, what that means is you won't necessarily be the best PvP player.
It means I may not be the best PvE player even.
I don't think that will end up being the case. I mean, we'll resolve that as it comes up.
I'm down to a tiny number of games I can play anymore. Is the problem.
True, and it is entirely possible this will end up being a game that is too demanding physically to be the best game for you to play. That's possible. I don't think that that's the case. I'm going to argue against it, but I can't prove it until we get further down the path.
I can give you some good advice on how to make it when I can play.
Why don't we take it offline though? But yes.
Controller input.
Very good. We can do that.
That's all I ask for.
All right.
How much is movement going to play in the combat?
Yeah, so that is an interesting thing. So, for the last game we did together, Tabula Rasa, one of the things I think we did right in that game was to get out of the mode that I feel is a tragic fail in most role-playing games, which is you walk up to your opponent, whether they're a PC or an NPC, and then you sit here and trade blows to see who does the most damage over time or runs out of mana or whatever it is first that determines who the winner is. And what we did in Tabula Rasa is we said, as opposed to just standing toe-to-toe, let's make sure the environment has some effect on combat. And so what we did is we did things like say, well, if there is a stone wall somewhere between me and an opponent, well, if I'm next to the stone wall that's 4 feet tall, and so my weapon, my crossbow, is over the top of that stone wall, and you are 10 feet behind it, and so I have still full view of you, I still get full probability of hitting you. On the other hand, if you, Joe, sorry, or a person trying to shoot at me, if only 10% of my body is sticking up over that wall, then you have a dramatically reduced chance to hit me. Just doing that simple thing means that if you see that that's happening, you're going to go walk over here to the edge of the wall to make sure that you get a full view on me. At which point in time, I'm going to walk around this edge of the wall to try to, again, reduce, make sure I have a tactical advantage. And we did that both for players and for AIs in Tabula Rasa, and I think it made the game much more interesting than standing toe-to-toe. We also included in this game, already there's being attacking from behind is also recorded. And that will mean that people have to move around more if you're for getting the optimal combat. But I think that in aggregate it makes a better game.